Episode 2 of Workflowcast, the only podcast that changes its name every episode. In episode 1, it was called Rantcast, but Rantcast is already taken. In episode 2, it's called Workflowcast. Workflowcast is also already taken, and it sounds like something from LinkedIn, so that's not a good name anyway. But yeah, and plus I also thought maybe I should just call it Castcast, but there's already a Castcast. But I don't even know if I want to do a podcast. Maybe I actually want to do a late night, a talk show. Talk shows are like out of style, so that means for me it's in style. I also need to start video, Hapex Cam. It's this little video thing that was vibe coded. It's like 100 lines of Swift. And I don't know Swift. But I really like that I was able to make this with an AI in like 1 minute, and it actually works. And this is exciting because this is what your operating system is supposed to do. You're supposed to be able to like compose tools like this. And AI is filling in all of the missing connective tissue that should have been built by the OS vendors a long time ago. So the next probably missing challenge is Twitter not being a broken piece of shit all the time. Like maybe when we get AGI, then Twitter will stop being a broken piece of shit, but until then, search almost never works. But somewhere I said something about this and I can't find it. So meanwhile, I built the latest head of Neovim. How did I do that? Well, I just go to my shell here by hitting Control S. And this is plain old bash. I don't use any fancy bash features. When I want to install a new version of Neovim, I just use Control R. Control R. It's basic old feature of bash and most shells. And I type make install, I get this command line, and then I run it. The new version of Neovim is installed, but I still am running the old version. You can see here I'm 353 commits into the development version. So I just run this restart command. It restarted my session, and now I'm 390 commits. How I use terminal in Neovim. The built-in terminal is pretty flexible. If you want it to open in a horizontal window, you just use horizontal TE and it creates a split window. And then if you want a vertical window, you do. Always make sure you use TE instead of term, because term is lame. TE in Vim doesn't work. So you want to make sure you use TE because it's cool and it's short. I make use of Control S, which is a plugin that I wrote and will eventually be part of Neovim. It's a single instance of a terminal that I just keep swapping back and forth to. So whenever I need a terminal, I just hit Control S. And when I want to go back to my buffer, wherever I came from, then I just hit Control S again. If I hit Control S, you can see that it opened it in a new tab. And if I hit Control S again, then it closes the tab and goes back to wherever I came from. If I want in an existing window or tab, then I just hit apostrophe Control S, and you can see that it brings it to you, just like it behaves like any other mark. So it's like kind of like a quasi mark. You know, marks are these things. They don't normally have, they normally are just normal letters, but you can see the mnemonic of having apostrophe Control S. That's probably why the Primogen has his, it is a similar concept. If I were making such a plugin, I would not call it Harpoon. I'd probably call it Get Over Here. The main benefit of having a terminal in your text editor is so that you can use all of the features of the text editor. If it isn't obvious to you why this is useful, then you may not be using as many of the features of the text editor as you could be. So for example, a key part of a text editor is using marks. So if there's a part in, say, an AI chat conversation I want to remember, I can just mark it. So here I have marked this conversation as A, and if I want to reach it later, I just hit apostrophe A, and you can see the current marks that you have. If your AI chat CLI is producing a lot of stuff, but yet there's stuff you want to go back to, you can stop the scrolling in the terminal at any time simply by going away from the last line. If you go to the last line, then it continues scrolling. But as soon as I hit Control Y once, another very useful feature is OSC7 is ye olden term code name for this feature. All that it means is that your shell will tell Neovim when the shell changes directories. So here you can see I'm in this Neovim directory, but I also have a separate Git workspace called Neovim2. And so when I changed to this other directory, it emitted OSC7, which told Neovim what my current directory is. Now, if I print the current directory, you can see that Neovim knows what the current directory is. All my plugins have a better idea of what my current directory is. Your current directory is the basic signal that tells things what your workspace is, what your current context is. If I'm swapping back and forth between branches while an AI is doing work on one branch, I can swap to the other Git work tree, show the fugitive status. It's showing the status of Neovim2. Now, if I change back to the other directory, then it's showing the status for that directory. So if you go to the help for terminal in Neovim, it has a bunch of goodies mentioned in it. The point of this video is to show that this is not just a wall of text for people that want to spend lots of time configuring stuff. You can get a lot out of very little. So this OSC7 feature, it requires this much code in your shell config. This is how much code it requires, but you do have to configure your shell with this tiny amount of code because Neovim doesn't, at least yet, attempt to magically set up your shell config for you. And that's the kind of thing that a lot of CLI tools written in Node.js try to do, and they will update your your shell config, your bash RC, and then if you track your bash RC or whatever your shell RC is, if you track it in Git, you'll see that these stupid CLI tools have helpfully added little bits of configuration there. Somehow or other, you have to configure your shell RC to emit this special magic code, and then when you add it to prompt command, this is the usual way for POSIX style shells, but I'm sure PowerShell has a way to do this too. But when you add it to prompt command, this prompt command runs every time I have a new prompt. It's running that prompt command, and it's sending that sequence to the Neovim terminal. In your Neovim config, you add a handler like this. Something that we could do in Neovim is maybe like define a handler like this by default, but we're not there yet. And actually what I would prefer to do is just to make it less painful and less verbose to define handlers like this. But this is where we're at for now. And so, like in my personal config, if I look for term request, yeah, this is my term request config. So you can see here it has OSC7, and then it's doing a second thing for OSC 133, which is the next thing I will talk about. So the first one is OSC 7, and then the next one is OSC 52. That's talking about clipboard. That's something we do set up by default because it doesn't require any special shell config in the user's personal shell config. And then OSC 133 is another thing that must be added to prompt commands. So it's another thing that runs every time you do some sort of prompt. And if we look in my personal bash RC, that's what I have here. I'm printing OSC 7, and then I'm printing 133. Oh, that's happening in the PS1 actually. So what this does is at every prompt, it sends this other sequence, and when you do this, it marks every prompt. So you can see here, if I press left bracket, it goes to the next prompt. Then I do it again. Other than the obvious, like you can search for things in the terminal, you can use Windows. I'll give a real world example. In CI, there was a CI failure about old test. So here I'm going to just add a mark to this window so that when I go to my shell, I can create a new window, go to the mark I just set, and then resize that window. And now I can run this old test. So I just used Control R to search my shell. And I'm going to paste the name of the test in there. Okay, so I reverted the fix to show the failing test. Now if I want to find where the test is failing, since I have run the tests in the Neovim terminal, all I have to do is do a search. Of course, anything is possible, and I know people have elaborate tmux configurations that help them connect tmux panels to their editor, but you can throw away all of that if you just use the terminal that's already in your editor. So I just did a search, I get a quick fix list result, and then I just hit enter, and it takes me to the file in my editor because I'm already in my editor. And now I can look at the tests, make changes, commit commit them in my editor, do a rebase, go back to my shell, and rerun the test. Because I'm in my editor. I'm not fumbling around with tmux. Another thing that I commonly do now that AI is common is while I'm having a conversation with the AI, I will have a scratch file and I add notes to the scratch file and then close the window. Like it's the same thing over and over. A capable text editor is a bunch of useful workflows that have been refined into this collection of tools. And code analysis, aka LSP, AI is the latest one. You can just, because all of those things are just, they're composable. The AI CLIs are composable. Neovim is intentionally designed to work well with CLI tools. The end.